His Darkling Creature by Eirgrude Ma, illustrated by Art Gaines. Chapter 3. Desperation, Old Friends. A soft chime woke me. Golden morning light was filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, painting colorful swashes across the beautiful rug I have hanging on the wall next to my bed. Actually, I think it's more like a small tapestry. Its surface is woven with a stylized image of Frigga and Freya enthroned, with several very attractive and shirtless men fawning at their feet. The autochef had already begun brewing my morning coffee, dark roast from the terraced farms of Sudacolombe, with just a hint of some alien spice that resembled vanilla. I padded to the bathroom, catching sight of myself in the smart mirror. The nanites had done their job perfectly. Not a trace of last night's indulgence showed on my face. My eyes were clear, without dark shadows beneath them. Still, I spent 45 minutes on my morning routine. Cleanser, toner, moisturizer, then the careful application of makeup that looked effortless but required precise technique. Foundation to even out my naturally pale complexion, a touch of blush to suggest health and vitality, mascara to emphasize my eyes. I selected a dusty rose lip color that complemented my professional image without seeming too aggressive. You understand the importance of these details, don't you? How we present ourselves matters, especially when dealing with the constant meetings and holo conferences that define modern work life. There wasn't anyone at the office I really needed to impress, however. I looked good out of pure self-respect. My apartment's balcony overlooks the artificial lake around which my housing complex is built. From the height of my floor, massive koi can always be seen swimming lazy circles around the central fountain. I always take a look at them as I take the first few sips of my coffee in the morning. The morning light caught their scales, turning them into living jewels. Off to my side, in one corner of my balcony, my small shrine to Freya sat surrounded by potted plants, my offering to her. I'd scheduled a delivery drone to replace them every 2 weeks. The goddess of love and beauty deserved constant honor, even if my own romantic life felt more like a battlefield than a blessing. As I enjoyed my coffee, the auto chef appliance above my kitchen island began my breakfast preparations: poached eggs, whole grain toast, sliced avocado, and cherry tomatoes. The machine whirred quietly, mechanical arms extending to retrieve ingredients from the refrigeration unit. It couldn't manage anything too complex, but for a healthy breakfast, it performed admirably. The smell of toasting bread soon filled the apartment. I slipped on my work headset, a sleek silver band that projected my virtual office directly into my visual cortex while leaving my hands free. The Interstellar Trade Regulatory Bureau's logo materialized before me, then dissolved into the familiar sprawl of our virtual campus. Glass buildings nestled among impossibly perfect pine trees, with the occasional oriental stone garden. Here and there, a simulated stream poured over rock features and formed little pools. A text message appeared in my peripheral vision. "Good morning, Decima. You have 17 new messages and 3 pending compliance reviews." I activated the setting that projected my actual face rather than an artificial simulation into the virtual environment. Anyone who saw me in the virtual world would see the actual movements of my face. Some of the older women always hid behind their digital representations, like Marja from accounting, whose avatar was mysteriously 2 sizes smaller than her actual figure. But I took pride in showing my real face. Why hide when you put in the effort to look professional? The system generally only projected your head and shoulders into the virtual environment, so some people only bothered to make their face and top presentable. It was likely on any given day that a significant number of my coworkers weren't actually wearing pants, but I always made sure that I was properly dressed for work, even if no one could see me in my full splendor. The first few messages were routine: shipping manifests from the Tauto shipping routes, a query about tariff classifications for synthetic proteins, an invitation to next week's mandatory xenodiversity seminar. I dictated responses while the auto chef plated my breakfast with mechanical precision. Confirm receipt of manifest TC4471. Classification follows standard guidelines per Regulation 7.3.2. Will attend Tuesday seminar. Thank you. I nodded at various coworkers as I made my way from the virtual landing area to my desk space, actually a corner office with a great view out into the virtual forest. Holographic displays floated around my desk showing real-time trade flows between the major systems. Red lights blinked where compliance issues needed attention. You'd probably find it impressive, all those streams of data requiring someone intelligent and educated to interpret them. Someone like me. I bit into perfectly poached egg while reviewing an invoice for birth assignments at Proxima Station. The numbers aligned correctly. Doc 7 for the agricultural shipments, Doc 12 for manufactured goods. I approved it with a gesture, feeling that familiar satisfaction of keeping interstellar commerce flowing smoothly. That's when I noticed them. A cluster of male colleagues had gathered in one of the glass meeting rooms, their voices carrying through the virtual world. Magnus Eriks, Niels Alden, Bjorn Thorald, Eric Gunners. They huddled together like conspirators, and something about their body language made me curious. I materialized a listening node, just a small blue dot with a circle around it, and flicked it over to them. One or two of them looked up at it as it drifted to a stop close by, but it did not stop their conversation. Birth rates below replacement on 17 core worlds now, Magnus was saying. The demographics are undeniable. Oh, please. The Xenos are already establishing footholds in the border systems, Bjorn added, while we're too busy with bureaucracy to notice. People have been saying that for 1,000 years. And the emotional decision-making in the Senate, Eric shook his head. That trade agreement with the Alfrith was pure feeling, no logic. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I rolled my eyes while spearing my last cherry tomato. Men and their doomsday scenarios. Civilization had never been stronger. We'd eliminated poverty on the core worlds, extended human lifespan to nearly 2 centuries, created prosperity beyond our ancestors' wildest dreams. But give a group of men 5 minutes alone, and they'd convince themselves the sky was falling. The auto chef chimed, reminding me about my mid-morning protein shake. I stood and stretched, keeping my headset on. In the digital world, my avatar remained in the same place, but in real life, I moved freely through my apartment. Going back out onto my balcony, I minimized my view of the virtual office and peered around. Other residents of my housing complex moved about their morning routines in the neighboring towers, all or mostly singles, like me. Young professionals who'd chosen career over traditional entanglements. We were the future. Independent, accomplished, free. Cultural stagnation is measurable, Niels was saying when I tuned back in. When did we last have a genuine breakthrough? Real innovation? Last week, you idiot. The new quantum displacement drives, the synthetic food proteins, the weather control systems. Things have never been better. I began my morning exercises, lunges, squats, core work, while their conversation droned on. I had to change into my athletic wear first and make some slight adjustments to my makeup. Message from Director Tayan, my headset announced. Quarterly compliance reports due end of week. Acknowledged, I replied between planks. We'll submit by Thursday. The men's meeting was breaking up, their dire predictions apparently exhausted for the morning. I watched their avatars disperse across the virtual campus, Magnus heading to his office in the import division, Eric toward the Xenocommerce department. But Niels lingered, and I noticed his avatar wandering toward my workspace. He arrived next to my desk, hovering uncertainly, his eyes darting vaguely in my direction as he made a show of looking out at the virtual forest. His natural face showed rather than an avatar, pleasant enough features, sandy hair, blinking eyes that couldn't quite meet mine. He looked exactly as awkward as he had that evening 3 months ago. He'd messaged me out of nowhere, asking if he could visit. I'd asked him why, and he's responded, just to hang out. Curiosity got the better of me. I hadn't really thought much of it. I had no interest in him, but I didn't want to be rude. To my surprise and horror, he'd shown up with actual flowers, real ones, probably costing a week's worth of credits. He'd sat himself down on my sofa and clutched the flowers against his chest, awkwardly turning to watch me move around my apartment. I'd continued folding laundry, organizing my bookshelf, half listening to his stammered attempts at conversation about work, the weather, recent hollow films. Eventually, I had asked him if he wanted something to drink, more out of pity than hospitality. No, thank you. You're busy. Eventually, he had set the flowers down on my coffee table and sat back in the sofa like he was getting comfortable. But then he had sat there and fidgeted like someone who doesn't know what to do with their hands. I had continued with my chores. What could he possibly offer me? I had my own apartment, my own career, my own money. I could buy my own flowers, better ones, honestly. He'd left after about 45 minutes, mumbling something about an early meeting the next day. Now here he stood again, that same uncertain energy radiating from him, despite our virtual environment. That was you? He flicked his head toward the place where he and the other men had been talking. He was referring to my listening node. It was gone now, having automatically evaporated when it sensed no one in its vicinity. I replied, pursing my lips, dismissive yet affirmative. You have any opinion on that stuff? I laughed, not kindly. I think you're all being ridiculously dramatic. Civilization isn't collapsing because birth rates fluctuate or whatever. We're crowded. Things have never been better. There's been doomsday predictions for 1,000 years. And look, we're still here. That's because everyone's moving to the same cities, and with a civilization as vast as ours, there's a sort of inertia. He spoke like he was surprised at how many words he managed to get out before I interrupted him. It's disgusting and I hate it, I told him firmly. That sort of talk shouldn't be allowed. Who knows where it could lead? Niels blinked and responded, surprisingly quickly, as if it was a question for which he had a well-rehearsed answer. Well, we're not allowed to talk about it. Not on the data feeds. I cut him off again. You're making me uncomfortable, Niels. I stared at him, cringing at the thought I might actually have to tell him to leave. Don't you have work to do? For a moment, a look came into his face that was some combination of hurt and confusion. But then his real face vanished, replaced by his professional simulation. A smoothed, idealized version that showed no emotion at all. He nodded, then vanished. He'd probably hit the return to home command on his user interface and teleported instantaneously back to his desk space. Pathetic. I stretched and dismissed him from my thoughts as I turned my attention toward invoice approvals. The auto chef chimed with my lunch reminder. The holographic invitation from Lyra had arrived Tuesday evening, floating above my coffee table in shimmering blue text. The Draugr, Deckhardt City, Friday 9 p.m. You in? The responsible part of me, the part that had grown stronger since university, almost declined. But Celeste had messaged right after, practically begging, and I found myself getting ready. The route I had to take was annoying. No direct paths from Elysian to Hernish, so my conveyance had to head out quite a ways and then backtrack, adding a good half hour to the trip. Bureaucratic nonsense, really, but at least the time passed quickly enough with some music and message boards. Deckhardt City's nightlife district pulsed with neon and bass when I arrived. The girls were already waiting outside the Draugr, Lyra in that stunning silver dress that made her look like liquid mercury, and Celeste practically bouncing on her toes in excitement. Finally! Celeste grabbed my arm. I was about to send a search party. The routing from Elysian is ridiculous, I said, smoothing my dress. They really need to update those flight paths. Neither of my friends had faced such difficulties. The planets they lived on had more direct routes available to the Hernish system. Lyra raised an eyebrow. You could have just stayed overnight on Proxima Station and caught the express this morning. I had work. I didn't mention that I'd spent most of Thursday afternoon shopping for the perfect outfit. This emerald number had cost more than most people's monthly salary, but the way it hugged my curves was worth every credit. Speaking of work, Celeste interrupted, you will not believe what happened at the Cultural Exchange Conference on Tuesday. I actually had to leave my apartment. Can you imagine? But honestly, it was the best thing ever. She leaned in conspiratorially, her eyes sparkling. I met the most incredible men. Not just handsome, though they definitely were, but successful, really successful. There was this xenobiologist from the Centauri Consortium and a trade minister from the Outer Rim territories. "Did you get their contact information?" Lyra asked, ever practical. "Better. The xenobiologist asked me to dinner next week. Somewhere expensive, I'm sure." Celeste practically glowed. "It's so refreshing to meet men who actually have their lives together, you know? Not like those boys from university who are still living in shared flats and calling themselves artists." I nodded, though something twisted in my stomach. Why was it so easy for everyone else? Celeste with her conference conquests, Lyra with her endless stream of admirers. Even that woman with Horace, what did she have that I didn't? The bass thumped louder as the Drauggr's doors opened, spilling purple light and synthesized music onto the street. "Ready?" Lyra asked. I straightened my shoulders. Tonight would be different. Tonight I would show everyone exactly what they were missing. The club hit like a physical force. That massive painting of glamour dominated the entrance, the undead shepherd of ancient myth perched upon his rock, blue-black skin gleaming, dead sheep splayed before him. His wide, crazy eyes seemed to follow us as we passed. This was a reproduction of the original painting by Caspar David Friedrich, blown up much larger than the original, with a massive oaken frame carved with fleur-de-lis and snarling gargoyles. The main floor stretched out in cathedral-like vastness, all black brick and industrial aesthetics. Red tube lighting hung from the impossibly high ceiling like macabre icicles. Barely visible holographic creatures skittered along the walls, gigantic spiders, dark-winged Valkyries with glowing eyes, mummies, things with too many teeth. The dance floor pulsed crimson, strobing in time with music that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Staff glided between tables in their stylized grave clothes made in imitation of Glamour's costume in the painting. Pointed shoulders on blocky suit jackets stiffened with too much starch. Their dark circular sunglasses tracked drink orders and tabs, giving them an otherworldly efficiency. We grabbed cocktails at the bar, something blue and smoking that tasted like starlight and regret. Then the music pulled us toward the dance floor, its deep, throbbing beat slow, hypnotic, and primal, encouraging the sort of dancing you'd expect from the undead, with slow, deliberate motions and sudden changes in direction. It reached into your chest and synchronized with your heartbeat until you couldn't tell where the music ended and you began. 4 dark-skinned men approached almost immediately, moving with the predatory confidence of frequent club-goers. Attractive enough, well-dressed, the sort who knew exactly what to say and when to say it. Lyra and Celeste responded with practiced smiles and artful laughter. I kept my eyes down, swaying to the music but maintaining that careful distance that said, "not interested." They were behaving normally at least, no awkward hovering, no clutched flowers. I couldn't imagine Niels in a place like this. He'd probably stand in the corner nursing a single drink all night, watching everyone else live their lives. The music shifted, becoming deeper, more spiritual. I lost myself in it, letting the rhythm wash away thoughts of work and expectations and disappointment. "Desi?" I turned, heart lurching, and found myself staring into familiar dark eyes. Jinnxon Tovar stood there just outside the dance floor, his black hair perfectly tousled. He looked exactly as I remembered, devastatingly handsome in that effortless way that made other men seem like rough drafts of what they should be. Not as handsome as Horace, obviously, though Jinnxon smiled more. "Jinnxon!" I had to shout over the music, but I hoped my voice sounded casual, unaffected. "What are you doing here?" He stepped closer, his smile warm and genuine. "I haven't seen you in forever." Forever being 3 years, 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Not that I was counting. "Just out with the girls," I gestured toward Lyra and Celeste, who were now fully engaged with their admirers. "You know how it is." "Come join us in the Helheim room," he said, nodding toward the VIP entrance. "I'm here with some friends. It'll be fun, like old times." My heart did something acrobatic. The Helheim room. It cost a fortune to get in, unless you were with someone important. High privacy barriers separated the dozen or so booths in there, laid out in a honeycomb pattern, and the club staff wove between the booths along winding paths. Narrow entrances led off the paths into each enclosure. You could literally get away with murder in there, and I practically had on a handful of occasions. "I'd love to," I said, already collecting my friends with urgent gestures. The door to the Helheim room was lined with flames. Actual fire, not holographic simulations. Walking through felt like entering another realm entirely. We followed Jinnxon along a circuitous route, then slipped into his booth. A few drinks were sitting on the central table. A circular bench surrounded it, with impossibly thick black leather cushions that seemed to swallow you whole. Jinnxon's friends were already seated. It looked like they'd been there for a while. Jinnxon must have stepped out for a moment when he ran into me. He scooched around the table and took a seat. I followed closely and ensconced myself by his side, pressing up against him. To my disappointment, he shooed me away a little. "Plenty of room," he said. "Everyone, this is Desi," he announced. "We're old friends." Old friends. That's not the way I remember it. "And this," he continued, turning toward me and sliding his arm around the petite blonde girl in a modest red dress that sat next to him, "is Rudy." The words hit like cold water. She was younger than me, maybe 19 or 20, with that fresh-faced beauty that didn't require artistic makeup application. Her dress was tasteful and elegant, the sort of thing that probably came from a mid-tier boutique rather than a designer showroom. "Hi!" Rudy beamed at me with genuine warmth. She had to lean forward to see me past Jinnxon. "It's lovely to meet you," I managed, my voice carefully modulated. It was quieter here than out in the main area of the club. We didn't have to shout. Jinnxon was already turning toward his male friends, talking shop, presumably resuming a previous conversation from before he'd left them. I found myself studying the girl at his side, trying to understand what he saw in her. Jinnxon was nowhere close to being as wealthy as Horace Chaney. I mean, still wealthy enough to get into the Helheim room, so perhaps it made sense that Jinnxon would go for someone like this. She was pretty enough, certainly, but hardly extraordinary, pleasant, safe. "So what do you do for work?" I asked, leaning forward with what I hoped looked like genuine interest. Rudy laughed, a light musical sound. "Oh, I don't work. I'm a homegirl." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" She laughed like she was embarrassed. "I don't work. I stay at home." The concept was so foreign I couldn't process it. "Are you looking?" No, I'm happy where I am. Well, I mean, I do have part of a degree in accounting, but it's not much more complicated than home economics level stuff. Maybe a little above that. I learned from home." Before I could respond, Jinnxon interrupted our conversation by placing his hands on Rudy's waist and gently moving her to sit beside me so he was no longer between us and we could talk more comfortably. I watched her reaction, the way her shoulders rose at his touch, how her hands flew instinctively to her breast as if his fingers sent electricity through her entire body. There was something so responsive and elemental about her. No hidden layers, nothing held back. She was fully subsumed by the feeling of his fingers on her waist. "Are you between jobs then?" I pressed, unable to let it go. My mind was literally rebelling against what I'd just heard her say. Rudy blinked, trying to find some unawkward answer to my question. I could maybe handle the books if Jinnxon needed help with his accounts. "That's a very useful skill," Jinnxon interjected with a laugh, catching the tail end of our conversation. Rudy turned to me with bright, curious eyes. "What about you? What do you do?" Finally, solid ground. "I work for the ITRB, I said, straightening slightly. "Trade compliance analysis. It's quite specialized work, requires extensive knowledge of xenolinguistics, interplanetary commerce law, cultural diplomacy protocols." "Yes," Jinnxon's voice cut through my explanation. "Very important work. If Desi didn't do it, it wouldn't get done." He said it as if it was a joke, but it was as if he had plunged a dagger into my heart. I literally felt an icy chill radiate out from my innermost parts. He said it with such casual amusement, as if my career was some charming hobby rather than a legitimate profession. The words hit like a slap, though his tone suggested he meant no harm. It came out of his mouth so naturally, but it crushed me. Had he meant to do that? Had he invited me here to humiliate me? How do boys do that? Reach into your chest, rip your very heart out, then pretend like they haven't done anything. I froze, my mouth half open around words that suddenly felt meaningless. The booth seemed to tilt sideways. "Wow," Rudy breathed, her eyes wide with what appeared to be genuine admiration. "That sounds incredibly complex. What's it take to get work like that?" She obviously did not see how Jinnxon's comment came across to me. It took me a moment to reorient myself, but then I began to explain my degree, my specializations, my years of study. Rudy nodded along, making appropriate impressed noises, asking intelligent follow-up questions that proved she was actually listening. Then she laughed, shook her head, and took Jinnxon's arm in both her hands. It's a good thing Jinnxon doesn't care about any of that stuff, or I'd be plumb out of luck. The casual dismissal, the easy assumption that my education, my career, my entire professional identity was irrelevant to romantic success, left me speechless. She said it so cheerfully, as if being intellectually inferior was something to celebrate. Did she realize what she'd just said? "Desi?" Jinnxon's voice seemed to come from very far away. "You okay?" I was trying not to betray the torrent of emotion that was flowing through me, but something must have shown. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "I think I'll head back out to the dance floor for a bit." I was angry and extracted myself from the booth without waiting for responses, walking carefully so my legs wouldn't betray the trembling that had started somewhere deep in my core. The main floor's music crashed over me like a dark wave, but even that primal rhythm couldn't wash away Rudy's words or Jinnxon's casual dismissal. I danced alone. Lyra and Celeste stayed in the Helheim room with Jinnxon and his friends. I let the music pound through me until my mind was empty. But it wasn't enough. Nothing here was enough. I paid my tab and headed for the exit, past Glamour's staring eyes and up the elevator that carried me back to Hurnish City's neon-soaked surface. My conveyance saw me coming and opened the door to the passenger compartment. The navigation system threw up a flight plan to take me back to my apartment on Elysian. It was the same circuitous route I'd taken to get here. Flipping through some commands in the user interface, I ordered the machine to take me home by the most direct route. It threw up a warning message advising against this. I hit the override command. Nothing ever happens when you do this. It's just over precaution on the part of the manufacturers. Everyone does it now and again. They wouldn't let you do it if it wasn't that dangerous. I was feeling terrible, like 1,000 stars were crashing down on my head. If I could, I would have gone to sleep right there on the comfortable seating of the passenger compartment of my conveyance. But I hadn't drunk enough, and it wasn't late enough that that was likely to happen. All I wanted was to leap into my soft, warm bed in my little apartment kingdom as soon as possible and wrap myself up in thick blankets and fall asleep. No drug, no cocktail seemed as desirable to me at that moment as sweet, sweet oblivion. The conveyance complied, lifting me into the void between stars. Perhaps I'd had more to drink than I thought. I dozed off despite myself, and the next thing I knew, an alarm was shrieking from the sound system, and the user interface was doing things I'd never seen before. Everything was vibrating, and through the transparent canopy of my conveyance, I could see I was rapidly approaching some massive planet I didn't recognize. If I'd known immediately what was happening, I would have started screaming.